One of the things that sets great brass players apart from everybody else is their ability to play with a beautiful sound over a full dynamic range. I have some tips for practicing dynamics and some benefits of doing so that you may not have considered. Let's get started. Hi, I'm Brian from Airflow Music. Alongside publishing our books for brass players, we're releasing a ton of videos with tips to make brass playing easier for you. So, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Airflow Music channel so you're notified of all our videos. And as usual, you'll find links to anything we talk about in this video in the description underneath. This video is part of the Trumpet A-Z series. Today we're talking D for dynamics. Playing dynamics well is one of the musical skills that can set your performance apart from your peers. Here in my teaching studio, one of the first things I notice about new students is whether they tend to consider their dynamic level when they're practicing. It's very noticeable in their overall approach to playing. I have some tips for practicing dynamics and also a couple reasons to do so that you might not have considered. One of my favourite books to practice from is Herbert L. Clark's Technical Studies. It's a book that many of us own and work from. However, when I ask a new student to play exercises from it in a lesson, they almost always play far too loudly. So, here's my first tip. Practice Technical Studies like Clark as softly as possible. Actually, it says to do that in the book. These are great exercises because they allow us to work on some of the elements we've mentioned in this video series so far. Air, breathing and breath support, and coordination. By keeping the volume down and playing them softly, you lessen the chances of overworking and over-tensing your lips, so you develop a much more gentle and supple response to the airflow, and that allows you to keep your tone more consistent, particularly at lower volumes. I would suggest practicing most exercises softly by default, actually. Also, it's important to remember to actually read the instructions when you're working from a book. Even though I recommend practicing softly by default, it's also important to make sure that you practice a full range of dynamics for each note on the horn. I like to do this on my long tones. I'll set a metronome going at 60 beats a minute and play something similar to the notated example on the screen. Starting as soft as possible, crescendoing for 6 beats to as loud as possible, and then decrescendoing for another 6 beats back to the soft volume and maintaining that for a bar. It sounds something like this. This is something I'll also practice in reverse, starting as loud as possible, going to soft as possible and back again. When you're practicing this way, it's important to focus on keeping the pitch constant. There's a tendency for notes to push lower as we get louder and push higher again as we get softer. It's important to recognize that the best sounding loud or soft note we can play doesn't necessarily equate to the greatest or least amount of effort we can put into it. Particularly at the loud end, the best sounding loud note we can play is typically around 75 or 80% of as hard as we can blow. Outside of the practice room, I try not to play louder than 80% of my possible effort, which keeps me from moving past a loud sound with good tone to the realm of loud noise. If we practice the exercise from tip number 2, this can help us identify the safe dynamic range we can play in and then hopefully improve it on both ends over time. In many exercises from all kinds of methods, it's frequently marked that you should crescendo as the notes get higher and decrescendo as they get lower again. In my opinion, it's important to not over-exaggerate these dynamics. Rather than being something to push for, they should be something that's a little more inherent to the shape of the phrase. Higher notes actually require a smaller quantity of air. It just has to move faster. The least efficient means we have of increasing airspeed or generating air compression is by blowing more air than we need for a note and then trying to keep the aperture between our lips small so it gets pushed out faster. Similar to the famous thumb over the end of the garden hose analogy. If you maintain good breath support, as we discussed in the video B for breathing in this series, you'll find it easier to ascend without overblowing. The crescendo will still occur and your lips will be freer to respond. It's not that the crescendo shouldn't happen, it naturally will, but I don't think it should be the focus of playing the exercise. Once you can comfortably play an ascending exercise without forcing the inherent crescendo, try backing off on the quantity of air you use as you ascend to first keep the volume the same and ultimately develop a controlled decrescendo as the notes get higher. If you can do this, you're taking the first steps to playing much more efficiently in the upper register and with much less effort overall. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to the Airflow Music channel so you're notified of all our upcoming videos. If you have any questions or any other feedback, please leave a comment. I also have a question for you. What topics would be in your Trumpet A-Z? You can comment with either an individual letter or the entire alphabet. I might just use your suggestion for an upcoming video. I'll see you on the next video. Now, go practice.